Everyone who, yes, everyone is here. You're only missing Geronimo, and he has already notified me that he would not be in attendance.
So what was that? Geronimo is not going to come today, or?
Correct. He has
Okay.
another obligation.
Is this being broadcast now, or is it only being recorded?
Only recorded.
So I guess really we could just start right now, couldn't we?
Chair McCarthy?
Considering that we're all here and it's essentially 10 o'clock, I'll call this meeting to order. Could we have roll call, please?
Yes, Chair McCarthy.
I am here.
Patrice Horstman.
Present.
Geronimo Vasquez would not be in attendance today. Austin Aslan.
Present.
Dan Acoli.
Present.
Regina Salas.
Present.
Jesse Thompson.
Present.
Our alternates are not in attendance, and we have MetroPlan staff. We have Jeff Milbeck,
Here.
David Wessel,
Good morning, here.
myself, Rosie Ware, present. We have our legal counsel with us today, Brandon Kavanaugh,
Present.
and I show others in attendance. Jason James,
Present.
John Martirosian with STSC,
Present.
and Ed Stillings with FHWA.
Here.
Have I missed anyone? So please speak now. I see someone in the waiting room. It looks like Anthony Buffa
Buffa. Yes.
from STSC. And I think that concludes the roll call, Chair.
All right, thank you. Before we start, I want to note that I'm going to move item 3F to in front of item 3E. Pretty minor change. And then I also note that STSC is going to make a presentation. Hopefully we can limit that to about 10 minutes. And so I think we can begin. Do we have any public comment today, Rosie?
Chair, no, I have not received any public notice of public comment. I mean, email notice ahead of public comment. I'm not sure if any of our guests present would like to make a public comment.
And of course, the ground rules are that it would be about something that is not on the agenda. Okay, so then we're down to item 1D, approval of minutes. And I'll just note that Rosie sent out yesterday afternoon, I believe it was, some revised minutes, which are essentially the same. They just had a couple clerical clarifications in there. So does anyone have any questions about the minutes from last month's meeting, October 6th? If not, could I get a motion to approve the minutes as written in the email yesterday?
So moved.
Patrice Horstman made a motion.
I'll second.
Okay, and who was that?
Me.
Austin.
Oh, Austin Aslan seconded. Okay, thank
My
you.
voice precedes me.
It somehow sounds a little different on my computer. I've heard it many a time. Anyway, any other discussion or questions? So all those in favor, please say aye. And
Aye.
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 any opposed? So that motion passes unanimously. The minutes are hereby approved from October 6th. The next item is consent agenda, and there's really only one item on it, and it's item 2A. And Mr. Malbec, I think you were going to make some brief comments.
Mr. Chair, actually, no, the reason we put it on the consent agenda is felt that it didn't need discussion. However, if you or anyone on the board would like to take it off the consent agenda and discuss it, we certainly can.
And of course, as you have seen in your packet, this is the adoption of the ADOT safety targets. So does anyone have any questions in that regard? Hearing none, can I get a motion to approve the adoption of the ADOT safety targets for Metro Plan?
So
Mr.
moved.
Okay. Second,
So Patrice Horstman moved and Regina Salas is seconded. Any other questions? All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed? All right, so the ADOT targets are adopted. So now we're down to item 3A, the Regional Transportation Plan. I believe Miles, formerly known as Jeff, will be making some comments.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the board, and our guests. I'm going to put a PowerPoint presentation up in just a second. I wanted to just introduce this and let you know that it's an information item to keep you up to date on what's happening with the regional transportation plan. I agendized it for action at some level in case the board wanted to take some action affirming or opposing the direction of the RTP. Not really requesting anything. I'm in a position where I don't think anything is really necessary. However, my understanding of open meeting law is that I wanted to make it possible for you to do that if you so choose, if you chose to. So the related strategic work plan item is to complete this regional transportation plan. It's a core work product that we do every 5 years. And Dave has been, our consultant team has been providing updates pretty consistently for the past 8 months or so. And if you will bear with me for a minute, I'm going to stop share and then attempt to put the PowerPoint up on the screen. All right. So the update for the Metro Plan 2045 Regional Transportation Plan is really just the purpose of this is to keep you posted. I do want to make clear that we are on budget and on schedule, and that we also have a lot of work to do in the month of November and December so that I can continue to say that to you in January. We've completed, well, we're working on the public information program, and the actual next item on the agenda, Dave Wessel will go into detail on that, and we will be asking for your endorsement of our public information program, our overall outreach effort. Literature review has been research by the consulting team is ongoing, and documents have already been shared with other staff at a technical level as we make sure we've got all the information we need to continue planning. And we've been working on developing performance measures. I am hearing some background noise. If it's possible for people to mute if you're not speaking, that would be helpful. And I want to share some current issues with you today that have to do with the Regional Transportation Plan Advisory Group and with the statistically valid survey. And then I want to talk about next steps. So as you may recall, I created an advisory group to the Regional Transportation Plan, kind of like a steering committee, which is somewhat new for us. I don't believe we've always done that. It's a tool I don't always use, but given all the shifts in the last 5 years. And those shifts being, went to the voters in 2018. They basically approved what was in the regional transportation plan. And then a lot of work has been done on the Milton corridor. There's been much greater interest in sustainability, with the city of Flagstaff taking some specific actions and adopting a carbon neutrality plan and declaring a climate emergency. So I wanted to be sure we're reflecting this, all these developments, and having good dialogue through the RTP process. So the group you see up on the screen of 9 people was really designed to get at folks in the business community, folks in the sustainability community, and then be sure we represent the agencies, Metro Plan member agencies. And then I've got 3 former elected officials whose names you probably recognize because they were very recently serving either on this board or on the NAPTA board or both. And we really have 2 scenarios that the regional transportation plan is designed to build out. And the first is to look at our current land use plan. And then the second is to look at enhanced sustainability. So both scenarios will, look at land use. They'll do a lot of funding analysis. They'll look at sequencing of programs and look at costs and performance metrics. I mean, they will both be thorough views. Rosie, I want to say it looks like somebody's in the waiting room who wants to get in. And coming back to the presentation, under scenario 1, I've been using this description for several months now, and I highlighted a few of the key words. Scenario 1, with the current land use, current planning, basically moves things forward projected from Prop 419 and 420 being approved. The plan needs to be fiscally constrained. And we have Ed Stillings from FHWA, Federal Highway Administration, on the line. And as a metropolitan planning organization, we are really mandated, required to do a fiscally constrained plan. We can also update new information, which we want to do. And what I captured in scenario 1 is that we want to make the current projects as sustainable as possible within existing constraints. And I point out the existing constraints are the language and the funding levels approved by voters. So, there's some room to fine tune the projects, and there are definitely distinct limits that we deliver what 419 and 420 ask for. And then there's scenario 2, which is to do an enhanced sustainability scenario. And the focus of this scenario is to reduce emphasis on single occupant vehicles. This is not going to be fiscally constrained. Okay, this comes with the problem and says, how would we do this differently if we were starting from scratch? And let's come up with a design that meets vehicle miles traveled and emissions benchmarks. It will identify, possibilities for major modifications. And really the point of this, and I need to be really clear with the board, and perhaps we'll have some discussion about it. This is a starting point for legal funding and design work if the community wishes to pursue it further. It'll be a long-range plan from a metro plan perspective, and then some tools and some places for other people to pick up. But it won't be advocacy on the part of Metro Plan. It'll be, here's some tools if the community wants to pursue them. And maybe again, in Q&A, we can come back to that, Mr. Chairman. So with the Regional Transportation Plan Advisory Group, we had some pretty robust discussions. Under scenario 1, there was a request from some members, 3 of the 9, to make climate friendliness a priority for 419 and 420. And then there's another perspective that the ballot language has to be a priority, that it's consistent with what voters approved. And the arguments for that being, we need to maintain public trust, that there's this federal mandate as an MPO, and that scenario 2 is wide open for the enhanced sustainability approach. The other thing I want to point out to the folks from the city of Flagstaff who are here is these are going to be city decisions and city legal interpretation. It's not Metro Plan's place to say, oh, for example, we've decided that you can spend the money this way or do this project. the most we can do is say, here's the plan. It looks to us like it's consistent and the city needs to determine if it is. And the point I made and the recommendation I made to the advisory group is that, and I asked for their support, frankly, that understand that scenario one really needs to be close to the line in terms of fiscal accountability. And that really the creativity of doing things differently comes in scenario two. So we ended up, having support we had disagreement. Some really want scenario one to be done differently. I'm telling you that we've had the discussion and I'm continuing to move it forward in an approach of accountability. The other thing is the survey. So we're doing a survey of 800 people, 400 in the city, 400 in the unincorporated areas. It's going to be statistically valid. And climate change questions came up. And there was some request that we MetroPlan not ask about climate change, not ask if people think that it's happening or if it's real. Some requests that we just not continue that line of thinking, not put it in people's minds or reinforce it. And we talked about it a lot. And I want to recognize that Chair McCarthy participated in a survey review meeting last week with the researcher. We had Joe Galley from the Chamber of Commerce and Nicole at Annapolis from the city, Josh Mayer from NAU. We had a really good, vigorous discussion. And what I landed on based on all that feedback and what we're sending into the field is to ask questions about climate change. Do people believe it's happening? And the reason is I want to be able to correlate people's transportation choices and their desire of a future transportation design with their perspective on climate change. And I made clear, I think, in my staff report and in some other communication to people who are really passionate about this for very good reason, that as a transportation planner, as a public administrator, it's my responsibility to make sure I understand what all the perspectives are. I'm not in a position of advocacy or lobbying or anything like that. So this is what's a really, when I say robust debate has been over the past month or so. And the next steps are a public information plan, which Dave will present next. The survey of 800 people is in the field this week. Literature review continues. We've got performance benchmarks continuing to be refined. We'll do more research with traffic modeling, which Dave is an expert on. And then really preparing for public outreach in the winter, spring. And I wanted to point out that our consulting team will do an update for this board next month. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I know I put a lot out there and I'm going deep into some of these sensitive issues. And I would like to turn it back over to you for any discussion the board would like to have.
And if I may, Jeff, it appears that our chair may have dropped off accidentally. We aren't sure. And so with that, since I'm the vice chair, members of MetroPlan, are there any questions or discussions with regards to this? I guess it's so clear, Jeff, that that's, would you like a discussion on a preference on your scenarios or?
I'd like just to take a minute here because I know my request is not, crystal clear, like I'm specifically asking you for something. My intention with the report is to make sure that the regional transportation plan is being, I guess I would say, courageous enough to have difficult discussions in the community where there is some disagreement, and that I think that's healthy for us. I think that's what the organization needs to be doing. And you are all very connected to the community. You see so many different perspectives. And I also want to be transparent and put it out there and see if there was any feedback of, yeah, keep it up, or, you know what, I'm a little bit uncomfortable, or just if there's anything you wanted to share, I just wanted to be available to hear it.
And of course, this is something that is primarily going to be within the bailiwick of the city council. And so I don't know if any of our city representatives want to talk about this and provide any thoughts on it, or anybody else for that matter.
I'll just say, it seems to me that this process is in good hands. Miles, I thank you for the conclusion you came to about including questions about climate. It makes sense to me that you would want to couple that information with some of the other transportation data that you're collecting. I don't know why we would be afraid to ask a question like that. So thank you for bringing that professional wisdom to bear. I don't have, I mean, this is a scientifically guided, statistically significant survey that's happening. I don't want to micromanage it. I think I definitely want to leave that to the experts in the room and those who we have assigned to the task of doing this the right way. It's not my role to meddle, but I'm looking forward to the results.
Thank you.
I concur. I too am looking forward to the results.
Okay.
Jeff, I think we should proceed.
All right, thank you. Appreciate the input. I'm going to scroll down to the next item, Madam Chair.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the board. This is David Wessel with MetroPlan, presenting to you on the public information plan. And we're looking for your support for the direction that we're headed. I'll give you a brief presentation, but building off of Miles' presentation on the overall regional transportation plan process. The public information or involvement program or for the RTP is going to be a little bit different than a lot of typical planning processes, where in a typical planning process, you spend a lot of time asking people, well, what do you want? What do you need? And developing a plan or program to meet that. To a large degree, we have those answers in place, and we have a somewhat new reality before us in terms of the context of climate change. And so these scenarios we are going to develop and present to the public and really get their response to those, to say, yep, scenario A meets climate change objectives, equity objectives, travel objectives to this level. Scenario 2 meets it to this level. And, hopefully in through the process, inform and educate the public, and perhaps more importantly in this instance, inform and educate political leaders on the information they need to try to move these objectives forward. So with that, I'm going to share my screen and pull up a presentation and walk through that, give you a taste of what the public involvement plan entails. Can you, what are you seeing?
What we're seeing is it's just long range transportation plan, but it's still in the PowerPoint.
Okay, so I think I'm where I need to be. You're not seeing my notes and all that other stuff. So what I'm going to walk through for you is just an introduction to the Public Involvement Plan, or PIP, a little explanation of this International Association of Public Participation, some of the tools in our toolbox, and next steps. As we put together this plan, we want it to be inclusive and multifaceted so that we're reaching out to many people in many different ways, that we're meeting the requirements that the federal government has of us in producing these plans and involving the public, that we're looking to be accessible, equitable, honest, credible, and sincere in how we reach out to and engage the public. We want to be flexible and adaptable throughout the planning process. We just got done discussing the survey, and there may be results out of the survey relative to climate change that says, we really need to dig deeper in this direction and maybe less in that direction. So we want to be flexible and aware of what we're hearing and respond to that. Looking to engage a very broad group and follow. You can't see the screen?
You can see the screen.
We can see this, it's not moving forward. It's still on the PowerPoint stage. In other words, it's not on the slides.
It's not on the slides.
I think
Okay.
it's start slideshow. I think if you click start slideshow from the beginning, it'll come up for us, and I can confirm that for you if it doesn't.
Okay.
Start your slideshow and then change at the top, the green button at the top.
This one here.
Yep, so change, so whatever it says.
Go to a new share.
Yeah, new share. And then pick your presentation page. It's like second,
This one here. Into
no, down one.
this one here.
And then-
Okay.
Sorry.
Okay. Thank you, Rosie. Is this better now?
Yes.
Okay. So I think I walked through this, give you a moment to look at it. The last bullet here is we really want to follow the IAP2 format and recommendations. And to that end, perhaps some of you have seen this, our colleague Sarah Dector and the city won an IAP2 award for their work in South Side Plan. And there's a range of ways to engage the public, from inform, providing the basic information, to empower, which really at that end of the scale, probably the ultimate is providing the opportunity for the full public to vote on a topic. Most of our effort will be within that middle range, and different efforts will engage at different levels. So the consult, involve, and collaborate. Some of the things that we'll be doing, stakeholder engagement is underway. We've sent out an initial email enlisting champions for the cause to help get the word out as we move forward with our public involvement plan. We're working on branding and messaging. I believe you all have received a brief survey to help us with that exercise. Would encourage you to complete that. Speaking of surveys, the survey is underway. We've got an update that we've had 11 responses, and the initial launch went smoothly. So we're looking for that to be complete before Thanksgiving, and an analysis by the end of the year. Website development, we're having discussions and hope to get that up by December. And then really the bulk of our engagement will happen next year and center around these two scenarios that Miles described. In engaging the public on those scenarios, we'll be looking through the use of public online surveys, community events. Part of our outreach to the stakeholders is to ask about what are those events coming up where we might be able to engage, and then virtual meetings. And appreciate the conversation earlier about the effectiveness of Zoom. In the public involvement space, there's actually been a lot of success in really expanding the number of people that are reached. So we're hopeful to build on that success. Don't expect you to read all this, but that list that we mailed out to is over 200 individuals long, involving many organizations such as you see here. That list will continue to grow. We adapted, corrected. We're literally to do our best to keep people engaged, informed, and directed to our involvement opportunities. These stakeholders represent hopefully the full gamut of people in the community that we try to engage. You can see the different categories here. What's coming up? Some of the stuff we already mentioned, stakeholder engagement. We'll, after we recruit our champions, we'll be scheduling interviews with some individuals, kind of group discussions with others, perhaps surveys to really keep those stakeholders informed and gain the best that we can from them. The survey that we've discussed, the branding. I'll mention that we really want MetroPlan to be the focus of the branding, and as we are a new organization and building kind of our credibility and presence in the community. And then the regional transportation plan will be kind of second billing, if you will, but planning is what we do. And then the project website. I'm going to skip this slide because I think Miles in his description of the update mentioned what's going on. So what we're looking for again is endorsement of the direction that we're headed on the public involvement plan, and take any questions from you at this time.
And I think Jim McCarthy has joined us. So, and so I'm going to turn it over to Jim. But
Well,
go ahead, Jim.
very briefly, just let me tell you what's going on. My laptop literally died. It's making noises you wouldn't believe.
Wow.
And it's absolutely unresponsive. So I'm on the phone right now, but on my desktop computer, I put up the presentation so I can see you guys. I can see the staff reports up there now, but that computer does not have the ability to have a microphone. So I'll have to stay on the phone for that. So thank you, Patrice. I did hear most of that last presentation. So does anyone have any questions for David?
I have a comment, and I think it'd be good to, and I know most of it's going to be next year anyway, so we have some time. But I know this is principally the city, but I think it'd be excellent to have a presentation with the Board of Supervisors. It doesn't need to be long, but just an update on the regional transportation plan. So just a thought.
Good idea.
Thank you. We'll do that.
Thank you. We'll work on getting that scheduled.
And I'll mention it to the county manager as well, but thank you. That'd be fabulous if you'd follow up on that.
All right. Does anybody else have any other comments or questions on 3B?
Mr. Chair, it's Regina.
Please.
Yes, well, I have a comment and a couple of questions. So I would echo a similar comment by Supervisor Horstman, and will also request MetroPlan to have a similar presentation to council in the near future. And I have a question on the Mr. Russell, can you please share the screen that on the stakeholders or the list of organizations as the stakeholders?
Yeah, let me. Oh, I think I can. No, come on.
Okay, so while we're trying to find that slide, I want to add a voice to include service providers in the community that depend on transportation or have identified access to transportation as a major barrier, whether it's for workforce, job training, whether it's housing and access to healthcare and childcare. I'm just taking this as wearing many hats with the recent workforce board association nationwide that I have attended in June. The major barrier to workforce either going back to work or getting training is access to transportation and transit, and especially to rural areas. And we see that in the region too, in Coconino County. And of course, for Flagstaff, Metro Plan, greater area. And then transportation as it relates to economic development and economic activity, and transportation as it relates to housing infrastructure, or access to, and transportation as it relates to childcare and healthcare.
Make sure I'm, Mr. Chair, Member Salas, hopefully you can see the screen. You make excellent points, and I think to some degree we have covered many of the concerns that you've raised and the interest areas. I think in the matter of workforce development, I can see some opportunities there, so we'll explore that. I think we have housing fairly well represented. We have many, what we call Title VI, low-income minority, disadvantaged groups represented in here. I have many business interests, but I think the workforce development, there's some opportunities there. We'll explore that. So thank you. And I'd be happy to sit down and kind of go through this list in detail if there's some groups that you'd really like to see added, make sure that we have those covered.
Yeah, also in addition is to also include the sector of builders and developers. Maybe perhaps add NABA, the builders.
Yeah, NABA's there, and we have several consulting engineers. They're not exactly the developers, but they certainly work very close with them and know some of the issues that they're facing. So we'll do our best to engage that group as well.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. House. Any other comments, questions?
Chairman,
Yes, go ahead.
this is Jesse Thompson. I
Right.
don't know if this is something that we're involved with, but I know we have a concern on transportation. There are residents close to Winslow on the county side that wanted to reach out to maybe the county to see how well some of those roads will be bladed in the area. There's been a lot of damages that happened during the storm. So I just wanted to throw that out there. Okay, thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Thompson. David, do you have any comment on that, or?
So part of our exercise, typically limited to our region, which stops just east of Winona, is to try to take into consideration operations and maintenance costs. And so we'll be working with our colleagues at the city and county on those issues when it comes to some of the particular roads that Supervisor Thompson may have in mind. I believe those will be outside of our jurisdiction.
Any other comments?
Thank you, David.
All right, I think we could move on to 3C. And Mr. Malbec is going to introduce and have a brief discussion on Sunshine Transportation Corporation Solutions and the steering committee that we wanted to talk about what his role will be. So Miles, please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. The subject is the Sunshine Transport Solutions Corporation, I'll be referring to them as STSC. And I'm recommending that the board support my role, executive director's role on a pending steering committee as seems appropriate to me. And I'm going to explain why I'm asking for this kind of clarity or support from the executive board. This item is relatively new. It came up after we completed our strategic advance. There's not a measurable objective about this item. However, we do have a mission, a vision actually, as Metro Plan of creating the finest transportation system in the country. And when technology or a possibility that you're going to be presented comes before, Metro Plan as a regional transportation planning organization that's really focused on the long term, I feel really like it's my responsibility to have an open mind about that and to see what we can't do to bring new and innovative solutions to the community. I also have, I've been in this community for going on for 30 years, and with my work at NAPTA for 21 years, I know that we looked at a bus rapid transit system, and we've looked at the public sector providing additional levels of transit service, and we hit on some real barriers. And Mountain Line continues to work on bus rapid transit. It very much might be in our future. We just don't know yet. So really, as a planning organization responsible for transportation system overall, with such a lofty vision as we have, I wanted to be open to being on a steering committee for STSC. And I'm asking the board to just really basically trust my judgment on this. I give you a couple of alternatives that, the board could say, you know what, Miles, we'd rather you just not be involved until we consider this at our next strategic advance next year, just kind of stay out of it. You could certainly tell me to do that. Or you might say, just jump in there and make sure you provide really strong leadership. And I'm asking you to just trust my judgment and letting things play out and giving some breathing room to this process, and then keeping you posted on what happens. It is an extremely ambitious idea, I think it's fair to say. And I presented it to the Technical Advisory Committee a week ago. I presented it to the Management Committee last week, and ultimately thought it would be appropriate to let STSC have, and I talked to the chair about this, take about 10 minutes and share with you what their ambitious solution is looking like and what their interests are. So with that, I would like to turn it over to, I believe, John with STSC. And John, you have the ability to share screen if you would like to do so.
Okay, and if I've done this correctly, you should see a slideshow that says Metro Plan Executive Board. Can someone confirm that?
Yes.
We can see it.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, thank you very much for some time today. We'll be very brief. Anthony, if you'll start.
Yeah, thank you all for allowing us to present. We're bringing proven technologies integrated in a unique way to reduce vehicle miles traveled and introduce a additional form of public transit that'll be complementary with those you already have. So John's going to walk you through this. We're a very experienced team of executives, and let me turn it over to John and he can share with you what the system is all about.
Yep. The background of our team will be included in the slides that were shared with the board, so I won't step through the details of some of our founders. The key system features for this are that it saves time from avoidance of congestion, being an elevated above grade solution. It's scenic, comfortable, quiet. You'll see the main guideway covered with a blue speckled surface. That's the solar panels that provide all the energy that we need for transport. I suppose the two key takeaways are that it's on demand and it's origin to destination. So you get in at a station, much like your car on the freeway, you go past all the exits you're not interested in. you pull off of the freeway, so to speak, pull into an offline station at your destination. It's on demand. There's no schedule. The system always has empty vehicles in the station waiting for people. People get in. It's your personal private space. In terms of ease of use, a couple of ways to get moving in the system. One would be like an Uber or Lyft, a mobile app where you pick a destination and then walk up to the system with your smartphone. Just as equally good is a ticketing machine in the station for people that don't feel comfortable or enabled with smartphones. The blue speckled surface along the upper right-hand side of the image is the bi-directional guideway with the flow of vehicles in both directions. The swept piece of structure that the vehicles are suspended from is the offline. I'll do an animation here, which will show you if you'll follow this vehicle on the far right. It arrives at a station. There's already a person there. They've used their smartphone in this case. That's their personal vehicle for them, a couple friends, however many you want to travel with. That closes and merges in with the flow of vehicles in the background, and another empty moves up, waiting for the next person who needs some transit. So that's the use case and ease of use type of information. The system has regular vehicles and handicapped accessible vehicles. It's got room for a T-turn with a wheelchair and seating for an attendant. There's a station attendant to help with boarding and fastening of handicapped wheelchairs. The vehicles can also carry a bicycle. So if someone is, that last mile home gets to a station, they can bring their bicycle along with them. We, as I mentioned last time on the public comments portion, we've been familiarized with and have dug down into all of the regional and city plans we're aware of, and pulled out the strategies and directives. And one of the things that we noticed, almost right out there question in the neutrality plan, what does it take to get people out of their cars? The survey exposed major themes, and we're fully aligned with the 4 major themes that were identified in the survey that would encourage people to use mass transit more. Why Flagstaff? The 2 or 3 key factors is the sun. There's an enormous amount of solar energy. The width of the streets are easily wide enough for a narrow gauge system to use rights of way. And while there are mountains in the background, there's really only a couple hundred feet of elevation change across Flagstaff. So where people are living is relatively flat. I have just 3 pictures to show, you can draw a station, but what does it look like, located in other places? So here you can see in a rendering, we're using the sidewalk as a right of way. The station has a footprint of about 3 parked cars. There's a small elevator and there's a landing for the stairs. Here from a different angle, you get that sense of a scenic view in relatively level topography. Just to go to the urban nature of things, here's another building we picked, Performing Arts Center. And it was possible to locate a station within a turnout without even losing the turnout. So the message is the stations can be located frequently and they're not physically large. We've talked to a number of people within the community. I won't go through the names of each person, but we're continuing to take in more and more information. And now we feel we're ready for the steering committee. The study will follow the normal workflow. What's there already? What are the goals? Talk to the community, business, government. We want to collaborate with Mountain Line to find a way to enhance our ridership on transit and see where the gaps are that we might complement and fill. We've met with Burgess and NYPL. Our plan is to work collaboratively with them and avoid any duplication. That would be foolish. We mentioned the steering committee will do the heavy lifting, host the meetings, do the agendas, present the information, work on the action items. We're interested in Miles' offer to chair the steering committee. And the purpose of it is to just make sure the goals are right and avoid any missteps. We think it's a couple hours a month of effort. Since we've talked, we've made a little bit more progress in the steering committee, and the people in green have indicated a willingness to participate. The people in purple, we've asked and are having a conversation with. And our final step will be to expand this to have somebody from the Inclusion and Adaptive Living team, City Council, the Mayor's office. Just to wrap up, we're pretty excited. Everybody that we've talked to has left us with this understanding that Flagstaff is forward-leaning. As Miles said earlier, interested in the best transportation system possible, and this may be one option, and focused on sustainability, which this system substantially addresses. So we're just trying to drill down and form a committee and get the guidance. With that, I'll stop sharing the whole screen and we could do a little question and answer if anybody has any questions.
The one other thing I'd like to emphasize is we're planning to operate this at a profit. The funding of it would be a combination of private capital, infrastructure capital, possibly public capital as well. And it's very much intended to embrace inclusion, ESG investment principles, and equality. And again, to complement what you already have. So thank you again for your time, and we're happy to answer any questions if there is time.
We have a couple minutes. First of all, thank you, John and Anthony. Interesting presentation. Does anyone have questions for John
Sure.
or Anthony?
Hey, I'm sorry, you guys.
Austin, go ahead.
If you said this and I missed it, but I'm going to ask again, what speed do these vehicles travel at?
So they go, the answer depends on the radius, like if you're
Sure.
turning a narrow corner, but 45 miles an hour is probably a nominal average speed. 30 at some places, a little faster in others.
So this is meant to move people quickly over distance.
Yes, it is. It's meant to move people, as shown, in a small number. And that's the big advantage, is the vehicle is matched to the payload. You're not bringing a light rail train when only 4 people get on. So that makes it pretty efficient in terms of energy.
Thank you.
Chairman,
Thank you, Austin.
Chairman,
Is that Jesse?
yes,
Yeah, Mr. Thompson, go ahead.
yeah, I'm thinking about, the right of ways. What kind of right of ways are you obtaining for this kind of planning out for this type of transportation?
Okay, so in terms of right of way, we understand that some of the city streets and sidewalks are under jurisdiction of Flagstaff, others under Arizona DOT, ADOT. The right of way width is about, for a single direction, about 6 feet, for bidirectional, about 12 feet. And the support structure is about 2 square feet every 100 feet or so. So the erection of the system is you do the site work in small, maybe between the sidewalk and the curb or somewhere convenient. And then later on, put up the poles and guideway. But in terms of rights of way, we understand that it's a combination of city property under the jurisdiction of Flagstaff, some under ADOT. And then if we were to go into a shopping mall or something, well, then there's also private property concerns.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, John.
You're welcome, Mr. Thompson. Any other questions? Okay, if not, I think we're getting to, Miles, could you scroll down to the 3 options that you've kind of outlined? you know, in my mind, there's a lot of questions, but that's okay. This is a new concept. And the purpose of this committee would be to get into those questions. We've talked on right away. We've talked, you know, does the city want this? Do the people of Flagstaff want this? One question that comes to my mind is how are you going to tie down the wheelchairs? My wife uses a wheelchair. I don't need an answer to that now, but the point is that there's a lot of questions, but there's a lot of potential too. So let's start the discussion from the executive board members on if it's okay if Jeff spends, you know, a couple hours a month on it or whatever this takes. Comments?
Mr. Chair?
Ms.
Patrice?
Horstman, please.
Yeah,
Yes.
and it's very interesting, you know, it's as you know, we're celebrating the 20th anniversary of Mountain Lion. And many of us have lived in this community for many, many years, and we understand how long it took to get our first bus. And certainly this kind of brings it to a completely different level of mass transportation. It's almost like personal mass transportation. And, you know, there's probably more questions than answers at this particular point. I understand that we have an executive director that feels that this may be something we should be involved in, and we should have at least our toe in the future, and in the future looking forward for mass transit. So I would support the recommendation of our executive director to take a role in this and keep us informed. It's interesting concept for sure. So it would be interesting to at least have him have a role in that. Obviously, this is something to take all your time, quite frankly. And obviously, I think that would be not productive for Metro Plan. So I certainly trust Jeff to use his time judiciously, but I would be supportive of him, you know, putting his toe in this area and reporting back to us on a periodic basis on his thoughts moving forward and on the progress for Sunshine Transportation Solutions. And I'm assuming there are others out there too. So it's kind of a way to find out what is there, what is the next, what are people looking at for a future in mass transport? So I would support having our executive director be involved in this. I would support option number one.
Thank you, Patrice. I appreciate your comments. Other board members?
Mr. Chair, it's
I mean, we can-
Regina.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Yes, well, thank you for this presentation. It kind of reminds me of the gondola up on Snowball. Yeah. So I am enthused to see what the possibilities are and and I do have complete trust in our executive director and engage in this project in the most effective and efficient way. So it's more like exploratory. So how does this look like for Metro Plan? Thank you.
All right, thank you, Regina. So Austin and Dan and Jesse, do you have thoughts on this?
Yeah,
Yes.
well, Dr. Okoli, go ahead.
Now, I'm very much supportive of this. It's a way of the future, and clearly looking at, you know, the technology that is out there and how it might be beneficial. And yes, I support the recommendation for our executive director to be involved, and he can manage his time appropriately. I know that. So thank you.
Thank you. Austin, why don't you go next?
Yeah, so listen, I gotta be totally honest, this strikes me as a little far-fetched for the Flagstaff community, but I'm not gonna be the one to close any doors or leave any rock unturned. These things can creep up on us quicker than we realize sometimes. And there is definitely an allure to this concept and idea. And maybe it's the perfect kind of community for something like this to get started. And if it were to be successful here and were to spread based off of the example that we're able to provide into other communities, that would be wonderful. I'm always about innovation and showing leadership and with great new ideas. And this is definitely a plausible endeavor. So I support using our resources to feel this out a little bit more and take it seriously.
All right. Mr. Thompson.
I believe that Jeff has probably already thought it through and probably has an idea after the number of hours or the time that he wants to give to it. And I do also support for one. So thank you.
Okay. So any other comments, or I'll kind of close up the discussion. All right. So I am supportive too. I mean, at this point, there's more questions than there are answers. But that's fine. We're at the start of this process. So I am supportive of option one. I don't think we need a formal vote on it. There seems to be a unanimous consensus on this item. So if there's no other comments, we'll move on. And thank you, John and Anthony. I do appreciate your coming and your innovation. You know, big ideas is what makes the world move forward. All right, so our next item.
Thank you for having us. I'm going to step off the call, but thank you. And it does take a village. So we really appreciate your support.
Well, thanks for being part of the village. And the thing with the village is you got to move around in the village. So anyway, all right, Mr. Malbec, I think we're going to have a discussion now about Milton Corridor update and the ADOT plan.
Yes. Mr. Chairman, members of the board, this is a very brief update. I don't know how much discussion we can have. This is about the same report as I gave last month because it's definitely on our work plan to get the ADOT, to support the ADOT Milton plan or to give feedback on the ADOT Milton plan within this reporting period. And we're kind of waiting right now for ADOT to hold an escalation meeting, which has to do with pedestrian crossings. So there's some discussion, I'll say disagreement from member agencies about how we want to see pedestrian crosswalks treated on the Milton corridor. And we're trying to come to agreement on that, and it's being escalated to basically the CEOs of each of the member agencies, and ADOT is in the process of coordinating that meeting. I did put in the staff report that the person who's been running this project for the past more than 4 years, Dan Gabbio, moved on. And I just learned last week, and Jason, boy, I hope it's okay for me to be saying this in a public meeting because I'm allowed to, that you are, you're moving into that position that Dan Gabbio used to fill, and you're going to be very involved in this project going forward. And I just want to say how much I appreciate working with Jason James. I recognize how ambitious this project is. I recognize how much time ADOT has put in and all of the member agencies. And there are some really big questions. And to get to a place where, if it's possible for all the member agencies to be in support of a plan, it's gonna take a lot of work. And I can just say I know people are working hard on it, and I'm hoping to come back with a more definitive report next month or early after the first of the year. And if I could, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to see if Jason James, who is with ADOT, has anything he wants to add.
Please, go ahead.
Excellent. Thank you, Miles. I appreciate that. Yeah, really nothing much to add at this point. I know that our MPD director and the Greg Byers and North Central District Engineer Audra are really trying very, very hard to try to get a meeting set up. There's just been a lot of scheduling conflicts happening, but I have spoken with both of them recently. And so they're, I think they're making some real progress as compared to last month as far as actually getting a meeting set up. But as I've mentioned before, that's really the only kind of last piece that we're waiting on to get resolved before finalizing the plans for US 180 in Milton. So thank you, Miles. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right, thank you, Mr. James. I guess I'll start off the discussion. I will say that yesterday I had a discussion with some of the city staff people, and it's become apparent that there's some frustration in the commercial community of the idea to limit left turns on Milton and to put up a raised step, what do you call it, a curb in the middle as a median. So I'm just kind of wondering, are we just going to ignore that, or can we have discussions about that, or is it too late or too early, or where are we on that? So there's some real questions about eliminating left turn lanes and how much it will cost and who's going to pay for it. Is the state going to pay for it? Is the city going to pay for it? Are the developers going to pay for it? From what I understand, it's going to be kind of phased in when there's new development. And for instance, there is an In-N-Out Burger going to be located at the old Pizza Hut. And, will this limit access into there? So I guess my question is for Mr. James and for and Mr. Mailbeck, is there opportunity for more discussion on that? Because I think there are people in the community that would like to see more discussion on it. So I'll leave it at that for now.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I'll take a stab at that, and then certainly like to hear from Mr. James as well. And I'm afraid my answer is not going to be extremely satisfactory. I don't have a lot that's definitive. My intention is to create space for ADOT to be able to bring their plan forward and share it with MetroPlan at the TAC level, at the board level, and I'm hoping, ask for our support and endorsement of it so that then we can provide feedback. Not knowing exactly what the plan is going to say or what ADOT's intentions are for moving it forward, I don't know how that might play out. I will say that I hear your interest in having more dialogue on this, and there's probably other issues too. So I'll certainly keep that in mind as we learn more from ADOT in coming weeks.
Mr. James, any thought on that? Please do.
Yeah, I'll jump in on this. This is Jason. So a couple ways to answer that. As far as any further updates outside of the escalation decision meeting that Miles talked about earlier, any other updates to the plans, we're pretty much past that point. With that said, though, the second part of that question, Mr. Chair, is the district and ourselves at MPD, we're always open to having that conversation, in regards to kind of re-reviewing, as you will, any spots on Milton that could warrant, left turn lanes or anything additional. So that conversation, that discussion is always open, and we're willing to come to the table and talk about that. But again, as far as any further updates with that to the plan, we're again kind of past that point, unfortunately. So that's kind of the best answer I have right now. But again, we're always open to the conversation and re-reviewing any of those spot improvements as you mentioned.
Okay, well, I appreciate your open-mindedness about that. And I do realize it is kind of late in the process, but it seemed like the whole process was very nebulous, and then all of a sudden it solidified. So, and maybe that's my fault. and not the state's fault. Do any other commissioners have some thoughts on this matter? If not, I guess we'll leave it at that.
Mr. Chairman, if I could, Dave Wessel
Please.
had his hand up, and I think he'd like to.
Oh,
share.
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Dave.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the board. Very quickly. So the plan as it's moving forward is kind of largely conceptual, if you will. It's setting broad guidelines on the future development of the corridor. It has been understood and pressed, if you will, by ADOT that design will need to take place for these things to be implemented. And during that design process will be one of the opportunities that Jason James raised for further dialogue. Just as a note, these kind of access management programs have largely improved economic performance in the corridor. That said, there are almost always individual businesses that will suffer. The site will eventually adapt to the new condition and be a successful contributor, but it may be that the use suffers. So that's going to be a large, policy discussion and debate to have as we move into design and look at the particulars. But thank you.
You're welcome. Well, anything that anybody does has its good and bad side. Two sides to the same coin, the yin and the yang. Any other comments? Well, thank you. Thank you, Jason and Miles. All right, the next one we're going to go to is item F. We're going to move that in front of item E. It just seems to be more rational. And so, Mr. Melbeck, take the reins.
Yes, Mr. Chair, members of the board. The strategic advance is scheduled on the calendar for April 6th. That's about a year from our last one. And I'm asking the board to discuss and approve an approach for the advance. And really what it comes down to is how it's facilitated. So as you know, we have a tradition of creating a measurable strategic work plan every year. And the last couple of years, I have facilitated them. And some organizations bring in an outside facilitator. Last couple of years, there's been support for me to do it. It's actually something I really like to do. But rather than just assume that the board and the TAC, my management committee, wanted me to still do this, I wanted to bring it up for discussion. I'm very conscious of the fact that organizations can become insular if you have one person who's driving things too much. And I don't want that to happen under my watch. So I feel like by bringing this up and letting people say, you know what, I think it's time for some fresh air. I think we need to bring somebody else in, let them crack things open a little more. You can do that. And that comes at a cost generally of about $10,000 to $15,000. Our TAC recently did this in a day advance that some of the folks on the phone attended, and it was it cost $15,000. So I opened it up for discussion. I shared it with the management committee and the technical advisory committee, and both were actually supportive of me continuing to do it and doing it in-house. I just really want to be clear. It's 3 years in now. We've been independent fully and officially for a year and a half. And if there's a good time to bring somebody else in and really ask some hard questions maybe and probe a little differently and deeply, I wanted to give you a chance to, to ask for that so that I could go that direction. So Mr. Chairman, that really concludes my report.
All right, thank you, Miles. So the basic question before us is, should we have an outside moderator, which could cost up to $15,000, or do we think you should do it? I have some thoughts on it, but why don't I open it up to the other board members first? Any comments?
Mr. Chair, I have a question.
Please, Ms. Alice.
Yeah, Well, my question is, do we have the budget for this, whether it's 1,000 or 10,000 or 15,000?
Miles, can you address that?
Yes, I can. Councilmember Salas and Mr. Chairman, we have the money to do it. I didn't budget $15,000 in operating, so I would need to move money out of either salaries where we have some vacancy savings, or out of our capital budget, where we do have capacity. But this would be an operating expense, and it would take us over that particular budget, although we have the resources to be able to do it. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Other questions, comments, or Regina, go ahead.
Yeah, if I could weigh in, I mean, I have participated in the last advance that Mr. Malbec has facilitated. And of course, he did an excellent job. But I do also appreciate the value of having an outside facilitator. So I guess it all boils down to what our focus would be for the strategic advance. And I'm good either way, whether it's Mr. Miles facilitating the advance or a local service, a local consultant. Thank you.
Other board members? Yeah, thank you, Regina.
Just, sorry, I wasn't sure. So,
Mr. Coley?
question, yeah, but what does Miles recommend? I'm not sure I got it here.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman and Director Coley, I don't have a recommendation. I put it out there for discussion to hear what you wanted from me. So I don't have a recommendation at this point.
This is Jim. I think I'll make a quick comment. You know, Miles has done this before, and as Regina said, he did an excellent job. I have been in several other meetings. City Council recently had some meetings facilitated by an outside facilitator. It can add something, but I think in this case, Mr. Malbec is completely qualified to do this, and there's probably other things we can do with $10,000 or $15,000. You know, it isn't like we have an infinite supply of money. So my recommendation is that we let Mr. Malbec do the facilitation. So, and it sounds like, Regina, you could kind of go either way.
Jim?
Other board members? Mr. Aslan, please.
Yeah, this is really not my strong suit. This is the sort of thing that always falls off my radar, and I don't really have strong opinion one way or the other about it. I will tell you that if I was being asked to facilitate, I would hire the vendor. But I've seen Jeff do this in the past. You already have a staff that's well equipped. I think $10,000 to $15,000 is a lot of money to spend. I think facilitation is important, particularly when there's maybe a great deal of tension among partners, or something else isn't exactly going ideally. It seems to me that we can all get in a room and get along with each other just fine, and trust each other's good faith efforts. So I don't know that it's necessary to go down the road of hiring outside support for this.
Okay, thank you.
If I may also, Jim,
Please.
I wasn't obviously on the board for the last strategic plan. It sounds like from people that were, they thought the process was well done, and Miles was able to do a great job in terms of facilitating the process. So I don't see why at this point that we should go down that path. I think Miles can do that and has proven he could do it in the past. And I agree. Usually you look to an outside person to come in to facilitate, outside consultant to come in to facilitate. If there's a problem or people are not getting along or there's a conflict that needs to be resolved, that's not the case here. It sounds like it's a similar process as we've done in the past. So I don't see any reason to spend $10,000-$15,000 to get an outside facilitator.
I'm thinking we'd suddenly have $10,000 to spend on catering.
We could have a hell of a good lunch.
Sounds great.
And swanky executive gifts.
Well, we'll strike that from the record. Well, all kidding aside, any other comments? It sounds like we kind of have a consensus that Miles should do it. I only see some of the faces on my screen here. So if, I can see Jeff, I can see Patrice, I can see Brandon. So if somebody else has their hand up, I can't see it. What was that, Miles?
Director Thompson?
Oh, yeah, Mr. Thompson, please go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, I too feel that Jeff is well equipped. He's done it before, and has that potential to do the job. And I know that maybe sometimes in the future, the field feels that there's something new that he might not have, and he wants to bring somebody else, he'll make that recommendation to us. But I think right now, he can do it just as good as he's done before.
All right, great. Thank you, Mr. Thompson. I think we have a consensus that we'll let Mr. Malbec do it. If there's no other comments, I'm going to move on to item E. And hearing none, so Rosie, you were going to talk to us about a potential calendar for next year.
Thank you, Chair. So this has become a standard that we put out each year, the annual meeting calendar. And the purpose of this is just to have the dates and time established before the year begins. We publish it on our website. We could put it in newspaper and other community publications if requested or possible. So there are a few things on here that are open for discussion for the board to consider. The first, very simple. Right now, our meetings are typically held the first Wednesday of the month from 10 to 12 p.m. So I would ask the board to consider either sustaining this schedule or considering a different time. Although we haven't talked about it before, I mean, I'm not saying we want to change it, just we want to confirm that this is what we will continue into 2022. The next item is in 2021, it's become our transition year. We have transitioned from Zoom only to having more of a hybrid meeting where we are meeting with some board members in person. And obviously most of us are still on Zoom. So those are the two big things to consider with this calendar, with hopes of being able to publish it on our website and potentially in a community paper by December. And that concludes my presentation, and I'm happy to answer questions.
All right, so there's two basic questions. Let's approach them one at a time. I don't see any reason to change our meeting time or what day of the month we meet. Does anybody have any thoughts on that to the contrary? Is that Mr. Thompson?
I feel comfortable with this as well because a lot of the meetings that I have kind of fits in with this. So this is a really good, the first part of the month, every Wednesday, I think that works out for me. So I'm good with it.
Okay, and I'm fine with it. Under the theory of if it ain't broke, don't fix it, maybe we'll leave it the same way it is. I'm not hearing anything to the contrary. Okay, now, Rosie, I think you also wanted to talk about, at some point, do we want to start meeting face to face? You know, and I think there is a possibility we could use the city hall, the council chambers. We've done that in the past, so I think there's some precedent for that. And I will say that, and of course, you know, I would have to run this by the city manager before, you know, I don't have the authority to give permission, but I think that's quite possible that we could use the city council chambers, and it does have the capability to have a hybrid meeting. In other words, where people are there in person or on Zoom. I don't know if there's expense that would be charged to FMPO regarding that. That'd be something we could look into. So I guess I'll just throw it out there to the board members. Would you like to start meeting in person if possible? Or do you want to keep meeting by Zoom?
If I may, Mr. Chair?
Please, Patrice.
Well, we just saved $10,000 or $15,000 on a consultant, so no, just kidding. You know, I think it'd be a great idea if we can meet in person, but I really like the hybrid. You know, for those that may be traveling or for other reasons, it's nice to have the hybrid. If you've got the we don't in the Board of Supervisors yet, but hopefully we will soon. But if you have the technological capabilities of doing that, I think it's a great approach. Gives us flexibility.
Right, I totally agree with that. And I guess the other thing is we are actually hybrid today. Mr. Thompson is there in person. And so we're really not changing anything. Mr. Malbeck, would you be interested in the possibility of meeting at City Hall, or what are your thoughts on that?
Mr. Chair, members of the board, I'm certainly open to it. I will say in our separation from the City of Flagstaff and the IGA that we came up with, I'll have to go back and double check it, but I'm pretty sure with the city, we didn't ask the city to continue to commit to host and support the meetings. It definitely has a time commitment and an expense to the city. And I actually is kind of, how do I say this? Grassroots as our technology is and making this meeting hybrid, and we've got some bugs to work out. You know, Rosie's pretty smart and we're figuring it out. So I think I would actually prefer to just keep doing our own thing in our own space rather than going to another organization.
So what if more people wanted to come in person? Is that impractical?
We could have, there are 3 other seats available, so we could have 3 other people very easily. And we could accommodate everyone in this room too, if we needed to. It'd be tight, but we could do it.
Okay. All right, so what we're doing now is hybrid.
Right.
I'm not hearing any strong push to leave that. Maybe I could have a conversation with
Mr.
staff
Chair?
at the city. Yes, Mr. Aswan, I believe it is.
I just want to mention that, you know, we are still in this pandemic. I'd love to start meeting in person too. I'd be more willing to show up in person if the space we're in is capacious with good airflow and we're able to social distance between people. And it sounds like, I haven't been over there yet, Miles, but it's from your own description, it doesn't sound like it meets those parameters.
It does not.
So just something to note.
Well, why don't we leave it as is for now, unless somebody else has a strong recommendation. But I could reach out to staff and see if what the ground rules are on outside meetings being in the city council chambers. You know, it is pretty spread out, and you know, even the seating for the audience, every other row is lined off where you cannot sit in it. So unless I hear otherwise, Jeff, I would suggest that we leave it as is with the possibility of open-minded discussion in the future.
Chairman?
Yes.
Member Thompson, the reason why I'm here today is that it's very difficult for me to Zoom or hybrid out from the reservation where I live. So that's the only issue I have, and it's very difficult, even for the phone call. And so the way we've done it, having it over the city hall, I thought that was really in a good way, have big enough space. So I felt comfortable being there one time, but that again, whether or not that's going to cost money, I don't know. But I'm sure that's one thing that we can look into. And I'd like to know, really get to look at every one of you personally, at least one or two times, maybe this year. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, those are good comments. So my suggestion is that we leave things as they are, but we bring this back for a future discussion. Why don't we just put it on the agenda next time, and we can dismiss with it very rapidly, or if we have some new ideas, we could, bring those forward and have a discussion. Does that make sense for Rosie and Jeff and Miles?
Yes.
All three of you. All right. Well, good. Even though we didn't accomplish anything on that, I think the fact that we gave people a chance to kind of give their perspectives on what's important, that had value. So I'm glad we had it today. All right. So the next item is Executive Director's evaluation. So it's time that Jeff and Miles get a review from the board. That's required in the contract. And I think, Jeff, you had some comments on this. You want to start the discussion?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman.
I'm sorry, I keep calling you Jeff.
Mr. Chairman and members of the board, I appreciate that. I put in my recommendation that the board approve an evaluation process, and that it's either led by the board chair or a subcommittee of the board. And basically that's because the contract that I signed, that I think pretty much everybody in the room here was involved in negotiating about 6-7 months ago, changed and obligated the board to evaluate me every year. And then my contract ends June 30th if it's not intentionally renewed. So there's not an evergreen clause. If you all forget, I just don't come to work on July 1st. So I wanted to bring forward, and I ran this past our legal counsel as well, before bringing this here. And the evaluation is something that you've committed yourselves to, and I will say I'd really like to have 3 years in to the position. I think it would be really healthy for my leadership knowledge to do a formal evaluation where I got insight and feedback, and I could adjust my leadership style as needed to give the organization and the community what they need. Things have changed in 3 years. I mean, when I came in 3 years ago, I was in an office at City Hall, and we're now Metro Plan, and so many things have happened that I really feel like it's timely. And there's a few ways to do it. The board could say, do an informal process, Jeff, maybe Rosie can set it up. And the point I'm making here is that's really pretty awkward for me to ask a staff person I supervise to do an evaluation for me. I've been through this before when I was CEO of NAPTA, and it's always a little bit awkward to have an evaluation process done. In my experience, there's really two ways to do it, and one of them, from my perspective, is preferred, and that's for the board to hire a third-party consultant to come in and do a really thorough review. And the review that I have laid out for you and provided attachments of samples, it's the review process that Mountain Line uses for their CEO. And it costs almost $2,000 to do it. And it's very thorough, where there's interviews with peers and there's interviews with the board. And then a lot of information comes back, and the evaluator shares information with the board, gives me constructive feedback. And, I can put together my work program for you in a way that I think is really reflective of what you want and need. Given that we just concluded that I should do the strategic advance and save the money, and I really appreciate that vote of confidence, to me, there's even more reason to come in and say, well, let's have somebody do a really tough, thorough, insightful evaluation process and get feedback from the agencies we serve and the staff and my peers and this board to just make sure that I'm conducting myself in the way that's the best possible for this community. So I put 3 options here, and I'm going to scroll down to them. And the first that I'm recommending is conduct a 360 third-party review, couple $1,000. And then the other alternative is to have the board chair complete, put together a process with maybe a subcommittee and run the process without taking on the expense. And then the other is to not do a review at all, which I'm not recommending because pretty much the board's obligated themselves to do it. And that completes my report, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Jeff. I think option 3 is out of the question. We're actually obligated to do a review, and it's completely appropriate. At least that's my opinion. So your recommendation is option 1. Let me throw it out to the board. Does anybody have any yes or no thoughts on these? Any discussion or questions?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I would support the option 1. It's one of those places where it's good to, spend a couple of $1,000, get an independent person to manage that process, and then the board will take a look at it. And but that's where I would lean or strongly support, actually.
And that's Mr. Okoli, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Well, why don't we just go around? Ms. Salas, what are your thoughts?
I actually am enthused to, option 1, which is the 360-degree third-party review. That's recommended.
Okay. All right, Mr. Thompson?
Option 1.
Oh, that's right. You already talked. I'm sorry. And I'm just going down the list here. I'm next. I support option 1. Ms. Horstman?
Yes, I support option 1, but I've looked at the Lancaster Leadership. I guess that's the program that was used, the evaluation that was used. But I want to make sure that there is full board involvement and review. So it's fine to have an outside person come on in and do this and provide the information, but I'm hopeful that that this, and I don't know because it's not all that clear, quite frankly, from the one pager, but I want to make sure that there's full board involvement and review on this as well. So I'm all for option 1. Can I say option 1 plus?
No, I think that totally makes sense. Whenever I've been involved in one of these, in this case, all board members would be surveyed and would make comments. The people that work for Jeff would make comments, and then some of the people that he interacts with would make comments. And then we would have a review process with the consultant, with the board in an e-session, I would presume.
Good. And the reason is sometimes it's important for the board to discuss this amongst themselves, not just individually talking to a third party, but sometimes I think it's very valuable for us to share our insights and input. And maybe that's part of the process. It's just not clear.
And well, I think it needs to be part of the process. I totally agree. And we would have an e-session since it's personnel matters. And that could include the consultant, or it could just include only the board members. and all of the above as appropriate as we go through the process. So I think Mr. Aslan is the only one that hasn't weighed in. Is that correct? Or did you weigh in? I'm
I'm
sorry.
not allowed to talk about my weight. Number one.
Okay. All right. So I think we definitely have a consensus for option one. And I guess we haven't really talked about it specifically, but it sounds like Jeff's recommendation is that we use the same consultant that is used by Mountain Line, and that makes a certain degree of sense to me. Unless anybody has any suggestions on that, I guess that's the way we're going to leave it. So who will actually reach out to the vendor? Will Jeff, will you do that part of it, or Rosie, or?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, if I could, just a couple of things. I heard loud and clear that the desire to have the full board involved in the review and have some kind of a facilitated e-session discussion with the board so you can exchange thoughts and notes. I'll discuss that with the vendor, and then I'll work with Rosie just to make sure we get them under contract, and then basically hand them off to the board chair and vice chair.
Right.
And they can, they can support you from there.
Right. And if you need me to get involved in that process, or Patrice, if I'm not around or something, I'm sure both of us will be willing to do that.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you. Good discussion. We made progress on that. I think we're down to item 3H, which is items from the executive director, Mr. Meldick.
Yes. First of all, Mr. Chairman, I'm going to add something here. I got a phone call from Director Okoli this morning, and I did not have a chance to discuss it with you, Mr. Chairman. But Director Okoli is transitioning, and if I could be so bold as to see if Dan has anything he wants to share with the group.
Yeah, just to say that I've really enjoyed working with this group, and just my involvement with the community on behalf of the university, as well as working with NEPTA. And of course, I worked with Jeff in his previous role. I really appreciate the opportunity, and I look forward to continuing to connect with some members as our paths may cross in the future. Yes. So and thank you for all your support and the collaborations that we've had together, working with NAU and the city and Metro Plan and NEPTA. And some of you have worked with in different other capacities. So thank you.
Well, I'll just say, Dan, that I've worked with you in several capacities now, and it's always been very productive. And I hate to see you go, but hopefully you're going to be doing something that's better for you. So
thank you.
Absolutely welcome. Jeff?
Thank you. I also want to say thank you, Dr. Okoli, for your service over the years, and I look forward to working with you whatever capacity I can going forward. And then back to the items from the executive director, transportation planner. I am pleased to report, and David Wussel, I think, is even more pleased to report that we have hired a transportation planner, Mandia Gonzalez, who's going to be starting here. I think Dave might have the exact date, but certainly imminently. And we're looking forward to bringing her on board to carry on some of the many items on the work plan that we've developed. And I want to thank the board for supporting the creation of this position. And I'm looking forward to enhancing our team as in the future. Can I take a minute, Dave, to see if you had anything you wanted to add about that?
Yeah, thank you, Miles, Mr. Chair. Yes, Mandia will start on the 15th, go through orientation and then come on board. She's got a great history with NACOG. My apologies to NACOG for depleting their staff, but she's got wonderful work history in public events, in website development, in transportation planning for pedestrians and bikes. Had wonderful reference comments, so really excited to have her on board.
Thank you.
Good news.
All right, then item number 2 on my report is just to give you a sneak peek of the December agenda. So we need to elect officers, and I'll put it on the board, on the agenda for action. Currently, Councilmember McCarthy and Supervisor Horstman are chair and vice chair respectively. They can both be nominated to or nominate themselves to continue. There's nothing in the bylaws that prohibits continuing. We just have to have an election every year. And there's also clearly opportunity for other members of the board, if you're interested in being chair or vice chair, to step up and do that. Please contact me if you're interested so that I can be prepared in my presentation and facilitate this election of officers in December as smoothly as possible. And then I also want to, in December, I'll bring back a federal and state funding update. There's so much that's been happening, and I'm going to put together a presentation and go pretty deep on what the funding opportunities might be for us going forward. And then I want to remind you about the mini grant. So the Metro Plan, the board approved us sending out a mini grant. It's in our work plan. We received applications, and next month I'm going to be coming back, hopefully with the recommendation of how that's awarded. And then finally, item number 3 is this recognition. I think the board is aware that we, Metro Plan, won an honorable mention and a national award from the Association of Metropolitan Planning Organizations. I actually did send out a press release about it. I haven't heard back. So, I know it is not world news, and the Arizona Daily Sun chose not to pick up on it. But I want to say thank you and congratulations to the board and to Dave and Rosie and everybody for their work as we've been through this transition. And it was nice to have it recognized by AMPO for the work that we've all done. So thank you. And that concludes.
The Daily Sun did have an article on page 3 a few days ago about some award we got. I'm not sure if it was this one or a different one, but they did pick up on something that we did well. So
we've won so many awards, I've lost track. No, seriously.
Well, it's had a nice problem.
I missed that, so that's my oversight. I'm glad they picked it up. Thank you.
Yeah. All right, so we're almost out of time, but let's go around to the board members, and we'll start with the A's, and then I'll just go down the way they're listed on the agenda. So Austin Aslan, do you have anything to bring out?
Is that first name or last name?
Austin Aslan, well, that's his first name.
No, I don't have anything.
Austin, Texas, Aslan. Dan, God, please say something. We want to hear from you for the last time, if that's what it is.
Nothing other than to say that this is a great group, great board, and also terrific executive director and team. And I've enjoyed working with the entire team and this group. So thank you.
Well, thank you so much. And thank you for being on, as you put it, the team. Miss Alice. You're muted. Okay.
Okay, yeah.
Good.
Yes, I had the opportunity to attend the RTAC Strategic Advance, as well as the Rural Transportation Summit a few weeks ago. And I look forward to a more robust discussion in the December meeting, along with the federal and state funding update with Mr. Miles. And also, just for everyone's information, the draft 10-year housing plan is available on the website of the City of Flagstaff, and there's a community survey that's going on, and it's live until 5 o'clock of Friday, November 5th. So please take your time and take the survey. It's about a 15-minute survey in terms of policy initiative and strategic priorities for the 10-year housing plan. Thank you.
That's a great point. Housing probably has more impact on transportation issues than anything else. So thank you. Jesse Thompson.
Thank you, Chairman and board members. I also attended that summit that was just mentioned, and I thought it was a great time to exchange a lot of information and ideas among the various groups. And one thing that kind of stuck to my mind was that there's going to be an increase of adoption of electric vehicles. And I keep thinking, how is that? It's going to grow. How is that going to impact our planning? So that's something that's been on our mind. So thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Ms. Horstman.
Yes, thanks. And just briefly, two things. Number one is that because of my other commitments, I know I'm vice chair, but I do not feel I can take on the chair role. And I know that Geronimo Vasquez is working in RTEC, and he may just be the guy for the position. So, and just throwing that out there for you all. And then number two, and importantly, I want to thank Dan for your service here on the board and for your input. We really thank you, and we're going to miss you on here. So sorry to see you go. And then thirdly and quickly, one of the things that does very much affect us here on our transportation and any future for quite frankly, transportation and our transportation needs is redistricting. And I hope you all are getting involved in that and taking a look at that. The IRC has come up with some redistricting maps, their preferred maps that would very much make the city of Flagstaff and Coconino County lose their voice at the state legislature. So obviously, I know this isn't a political group. On the other hand, we deal with political realities. So I hope that you're all taking a close look in redistricting and will be heard on the redistricting during the redistricting process.
Thank you, Patrice.
That's it. Thank you.
I will note that by unanimous vote, just last night, the City Council is recommending support for the same maps that the county has put forward. So you were at the meeting. I guess you know that, but I just, for the sake of other people.
Yeah, and thank you, and thank you for that. And please, everybody, please take a look at what's being proposed and take a look at the county's maps. So, and be heard. You have from now until November 20th to provide written comments.
Well, we didn't do it as a favor. We did it because what you put forward made sense.
I know that.
To follow up on Patrice's comment, about chair and vice chair next month, I'm open-minded about staying on as chair or moving aside and letting somebody else take the reins if they would like to. So I'm very open-minded about that. And I guess the last thing I'll say, this is the very first time in my life I've ever done a Zoom meeting by telephone. And I guess I have to go down and see why my computer literally, it's making noises. It sounds like a saw. It's weird. And it won't turn off. I can't turn it off. So anyway, let's see. The next meeting will be December 1st. Same arrangements, unless we hear otherwise. And I'll just open up one last time to see if anybody has any comments before we adjourn. Any final comments? All right, I'll just say thank you to everyone, and the meeting is hereby adjourned at approximately 11:54, 6 minutes ahead of time. Thank you, everyone,
Thank you.
especially Dan.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Everybody.